we have reached the end of this church year. This is the Sunday known as Christ the King Sunday, or Reign of Christ for those of us who are not crazy about king language when it comes to Jesus. And we're also at the point in the gospel where Jesus has spoken about the end times, what's going to happen eventually. We looked at it a bit last week. We looked at also the 10 virgins, the 10 maidens being ready for the wedding. Jesus is setting up this whole paradigm of preparing us for what is at the end. And the separating of the sheep and goats is something that is very familiar, to the point where many of us just tune out the story. It's so familiar that in popular culture we'll hear the reference separating sheep and goats, and a lot of people don't even know that that's a biblical reference or where that came from. So we have this image in front of us where God has all of these herd animals together, these goats and these sheep, all raised together, which is what shepherds did in the first century Palestine, and separating of the sheep and the goats, that the sheep are the good ones, the goats are the bad ones. And both of them say, well, why did you select us that way? And Jesus says, you didn't realize this, but how you were treated the least of me, how you treated the poorest, the most downtrodden members of my human family, is how you treated me. And we've got the real juxtaposition now liturgically, because remember, this is the reign of Christ, Christ being on high, with scripture that talks about Christ being the lowest of the low. So we've got that kind of dichotomy going on. But we also have the congregants, the people being separated, being really surprised. What did we do that justified us being put into one category or another? Jesus explains that when you fed the hungry, when you took care of the homeless, when you cared for the prisoner, when you healed the sick, when you took care of all of the lowly people around, that's when you did for me. Now, 2,000 years ago, that was a pretty easy group to find, because people were literally dying of starvation on the street right in front of you. And people were mishoused. They were jailed under suspicion, not really any court of assessment, guilty until proven innocent. The homeless was quite obvious. They were sleeping everywhere they could find. People were routinely dying out in the open where anyone could see. Taking care of the least of these was very obvious, and the Christian church did that. It stepped in, and it was revolutionary in its time. It took in the orphans and the widows. It took the babies off the side of the road that were left there to die. It healed people. Christians died themselves trying to heal people from pandemics and diseases. They didn't know what they were doing. They just knew that the least of these needed their comfort. Skip forward now to the early 1900s, and we have a movement known as the social gospel movement. And there are other groups around as well that kind of share this understanding that collectively as a society, we were responsible for each other. And that movement spurred the United Church of Canada, for one, political parties. It brought in a lot of what in the United States was known as the New Deal. It gave a sense that, children should be in school. They shouldn't be working in factories. A limited work week was expected, that people deserved, if they were hurt at work, they deserved to be taken care of. People deserved to be fed. Prisons were not places of torture. Whatever the crime was, those people still deserve to be treated like a human being. And this movement spurred almost all of the social reforms that we take for granted today. Unions, income support, mother's relief, child support, all of these things that make our society good. So we sit here now in the 21st century, taking for granted all the things that were not available when Jesus was first teaching his people. So what can we get from this gospel? Now, 100 years ago, when the social gospel movement was starting, we also had a pope standing up in 1925 and saying, I'm going to institute a new feast, Christ the King. And we're going to celebrate this throughout Christendom. Everybody is going to be part of this feast. And the whole point of Christ the King, or as we call it now, Reign of Christ, was that authoritarian fascist governments were not able to take over control, that they were not meant to be the ultimate, that Christ was something better. It was looking around at Mussolini and all the problems that were happening in Italy at the time that the Pope decided the church had to step up and make a difference and say something different. And it did. And every social network that you can think of that we take advantage of today also stems from an understanding of a lot of people in the church, a lot of leaders, that we needed to do better. We needed to take care of the least of these. But in the 21st century, who are the least of these? It is easy to give to charity these days. We don't have to actually feed the poor. We can just give to food banks, or we can give to organizations that help them. We don't have to house the homeless. We give to charities that provide low income housing. There are shelters in place. There are encouragements to build more homes that are affordable. We don't have to worry about taking care of the sick. Our taxes go to the hospitals to take care of that. We don't have to personally invite them into our home and take care of people. We don't have to bring disease into our presence. We just pay people to do it. And we've gotten into that habit. We pay people to take care of the least of these. We pay nurses and doctors to take care of the sick. We pay restaurateurs and grocery stores and charities to take care of the homeless and the hungry. We pay old folks' homes to take care of the seniors. We don't actually look in the face of the least of these to see Jesus. In fact, charitable giving is one of the markers that the Pew Research Society, when they're judging whether or not religion is important, the generosity of non-religious people is just the same as the generosity of religious people. So they take it for granted that generosity and giving to the least of these is not the least bit important to the Christian faith. And that's wrong. We are called by Jesus to look to the least, to look for the face of Jesus in the hurting. It's hard now to see that hurting. You have to look a little more clearly. But the good thing about that is that the hurting as Jesus identified, the tending to their needs, the taking care of the things that we could care for, that's a really, really low bar. A lot of right-wing thinkers get caught up in the separation of the sheep and goats. And the whole image is that they're equal-sized groups, that the good people and the bad people are both among us in equal representation, and it's just by a few good things that we do that we're either in one or the other. I don't think that's the case. I think the separation of the sheep and the goats, whatever metaphor we want to use that's actually practical and applicable in 21st century, is not a matter of equal division. It's a matter of this is what could happen to you. Because remember, we're talking about the eschaton. We're not talking about things that are imminent. We're talking about things that are promised at the end time. So all of this, when the end time happens, that's it. It's all over. We have completed the mission. The bar that Jesus sets for right now, imaging what the end time is going to be, is extremely low. Take care of each other. Find my face. Find me in people who are broken, in people who are disheartened, in people who feel they don't have any options. Find me in the prostitutes that are so worn by Friday and Saturday and Sunday mornings that they just want to relax somewhere. Give them the space they need. Find me in the drug addicts who are hanging outside of treatment centers or hidden in the back alleys. People who are so addicted to drugs that they cannot make good choices for themselves, who might be starving because all of their money goes for their next hit. Find Jesus in those people. And not even so drastically. Find Jesus in the heart of the person who may be as rich as all get out and is emotionally so lost and lonely. All they think they have to offer the world is their ability to make money. Find Jesus in the face of the barkeeper or the waitress, the people who are working right now in a pandemic to satisfy the luxury needs of those who want to go out to eat and think that they can live like it's 2019. Find Jesus in the face of them when they say, please stay in your seat. Do not move around. Do not grab things that are not there for you. Wait till I get to you. Find Jesus in the pain of these people working so hard to keep the patrons safe, and the patrons aren't respecting it. Find Jesus in the storekeepers, the small ones who are going out of business because everybody else is putting their money into big corporations rather than looking at the mom and pops in our community. The least of these are not always going to be the despondent ones lying around on the streets. Those days are over. We have created a social network, so most of those folks have at least some place to eat or go to. It's not perfect. It needs a lot of work, but there's something there. The call of 2021 is not to be satisfied with us doing the least. Anyone can give to charity. But do you actually walk down the street and hand out granola bars to people who look like they're starving? I had someone come to my car the other day with my son in it, and he was asking for money. And in this plastic world, it's hard. It's rare that we actually have coins with us. But I gave him some of the food that we had. And the longer I talked with my son, I realized it wasn't enough. I did not do for this man everything that I could do. Now, by the time I was able to move around and find him, he was gone. So I couldn't fix that. I have to live with not stepping up in the moment when I could have. He has to live with me not stepping up in the moment when I could have. But the least of these, the face of Jesus in the crowds, in the individual, in the isolated wards, the face of Jesus is who we must always look for. Because, you see, in the gospel, the goats and the sheep were surprised. They didn't know what was what. They didn't know who it was that Jesus was talking about. We don't have the excuse of that ignorance. We've been told through the gospel message, and we've been told through 2,000 years of theology and preaching, who and what we're looking for. For us to go ahead and look for the least of these, the person that needs Jesus, the person that shows us Jesus in real form, that is where we're supposed to focus. And us being made a little uncomfortable is not a bad thing. Giving from our abundance, anybody can give from abundance. Giving from our lacking, however, that's when Jesus says we really have this figured out about giving to the lowly and recognizing Jesus in all people. 2021 does not isolate us from being kind. 2020. I'm ahead of myself. 2020 does not isolate us from being kind, even though we're restricted from each other. There are ways we can keep doing it even today. The lesson of this gospel, the irony of the Reign of Christ Sunday, is that the powerful in earthly standards do not mean anything to Jesus, do not mean anything for the kingdom. We have the ability to minister, and it's our responsibility right up to the end. Judgment has not happened. It is full of hope and promise because we can still change how we do things and who we do things for. That's the great wonder of the promise, that we know what's going to come so we can better prepare for it. We can change how we do things, and we can truly minister the way Jesus asked us to do. And on this last Sunday of the year, it's a really good time, like any eve of the new year, to look back to where we've been and make plans to where we want to go. That's the gift we have been given. It is not Judgment Day. It is kind of get it together and proceed properly day.